I would like to take this chance to apologize to the Holloway family and my own family. I hope my statement provides some sense of closure. I am not the person I was back in 2005. And then he went on to say that he had given his heart to Jesus Christ. So that was the short statement that he made in court. Every turn that he was asked a question was very respectful. Didn't seem snarky or trite or contrite at all in the courtroom. He was wearing, as we all know, an orange jumpsuit that he has been donning in the Shelby County Jail. He'll be immediately returned to Peru by the U.S. Marshal Service in the next few days. Of course, the judge said that would be at the earliest convenience. I don't believe it will be today, but I'm sure in the next couple of days, as soon as they can secure the proper paperwork to return him to Peru after the sentencing today.
I want to ask you, you've been covering this, 18 years. A lot of people in the Birmingham metro area have been wanting to know or at least get an end to this. For you personally, just sitting in there and watching the emotions and hearing what Joran van der Sloot had to say and what Beth Holloway had to say, can you kind of just help us understand the emotions that happened in that courtroom?
Well, the courtroom was packed, as you can imagine. I estimated about 120 people were in the courtroom. I don't know if there are any empty seats. That is the biggest courtroom in the Hugo Black Federal Courthouse on the 8th floor. In fact, the Holloway family, Dave, I believe it's Matt, is the son, and Beth were all sitting at the prosecution table. A number of other people are also there that I recognize, different attorneys and such. A lot of community members were here that knew Beth and still know Beth. They lived in Mountain Brook at the time, 18 years ago. In fact, I remember first hearing about this case 18 years ago. I was actually at this courthouse covering a different trial and not realizing how long the story would not only last but haunt the community. And so today, a sense of closure not only for the community but the Holloway family, now knowing what ultimately happened to their daughter. It was a remainder mystery because Joran van der Sloot kept it a secret. So ultimately, we now know that he murdered her, bludgeoned her to death. We don't know exactly how the body was disposed of, but basically the judge, in wrapping up her sentencing comments, said that he destroyed her remains. We should be able to maybe get some more information about that if there are any more details that are released in the court filings later today, hopefully.
Okay, so hopefully then we will know if there's a possibility of recovering those. I know you're saying destroyed.
I believe no, I don't believe there's going to be any recovery of the remains, and there's not going to be any additional investigation. He will not be prosecuted for her murder. The statute of limitations in Aruba is actually 12 years, so those expired 6 years ago. That expired 6 years ago, so he's not going to be prosecuted for this any further. Interesting to point out is the sentencing guidelines for wire fraud and extortion under the circumstances of this case, the judge said was about 3 to 4 years. So as a part of the plea deal, van der Sloot and the prosecution agreed to up that to 240 months, which is 20 years. And the judge actually said she weighed making the sentence consecutive, not concurrent. Concurrent means when you run a sentence at the same time as another sentence. She actually considered running it consecutively. So when he gets out of his, finished serving his Peruvian sentence, he would then have to serve an additional 20 years in a U.S. federal prison. But she decided to go with the 20 years. But the upward departure from the sentencing guidelines from 3 to 4 years to 20 years was extreme, and she said based on the facts of the case and his confession that was the least she could do. She wished she could do more.
So, obviously you'll probably get these answered from the federal prosecutors, but, with working with the Peruvian government, to get him here to face these Alabama charges, how's it looking in your expertise with getting him back to serving that? Is it going to be easy?
It will be. I mean, it's just a matter of it's a diplomatic paperwork, I would guess. I mean, they knew this was coming. They gave the treaty agreement between the Peruvian government and the United States government was for 1 year. They had 1 year to prosecute him for these crimes. If the case had not been adjudicated in that 1 year, they would have to file an extension. So it's only a matter of, and they've probably already been in contact with the different authorities in Peru, and I would assume he would not still be in the United States by the end of the weekend. That's just my assumption. I've not been told that, but the judge did say as soon as possible he will be removed from Jefferson County, from Alabama, and taken back to the Peruvian prison where he'll serve the rest of his murder sentence there. For also, I understand today, for killing a woman, this is what the judge said, for killing another woman that refused sexual advances on the actual anniversary of Natalee Holloway's death. So he killed another woman in Peru on the anniversary of Natalee Holloway's death for refusing his sexual advances. The same motive that was revealed today in court for why he killed Natalee Holloway back in May of 2005.
Was there any eye contact contact? Did he look at the family? Was there any remorse that you can see?
I mean, I was sitting directly behind him. I was on the 4th row. He walked in, glanced over at a myriad of people, but didn't make direct eye contact. I could sort of see where Beth was sitting. She was sitting at the prosecution table, which, if you're looking at the judge, which is to the left, like I said, at the very end of her statement, she paused and turned and looked directly at him and said, "You look like hell, Your Honor. I don't think you're going to make it in prison," basically, and then turned back and wrapped up her statement to the judge. So very powerful statement from her. And other than that, I mean, on his part, like I said, he was wearing an orange jumpsuit that he wears in the Shelby County Jail. He was in shackles, ankle shackles and handcuffs. He was very respectful, and yes ma'am, no ma'am, and beyond that, I really can't say anything more about his appearance and his demeanor in the courtroom.
And I wanted to ask this. I mean, you saying obviously yes ma'am, no ma'am, but no translator was needed in
No, he speaks very good English, and he made that very clear at his arraignment back in June. They offered him a translator because he's Dutch. They basically, and he turned that down. He goes, "No, my English is very good," and it was. A few biographical things. I mean, he was asked his, state his name, and he gave his date of birth, 1987. Finished high school. Actually has a daughter himself now. That was something that the judge, that was something that Beth Holloway highlighted. That one thing they do have in common is that they both have daughters, and obviously Beth was, her daughter's gone, and he took her life. He's admitted to that. He's confessed to that as part of this plea deal. But he has a daughter himself. She would not name the daughter. Obviously, out of respect for her, and just wanted him to think about what he would do in her situation, how he would feel about somebody that would murder somebody for refusing their sexual advances and bludgeoning them to death. And so
the folks who were in there, the community members who have known Beth for so long, and even Natalie, would you say that it was very quiet in there when describing how she died?
Yes, I mean, you could hear a pin drop, I guess you could say. Very, very silent in the room. When the judge walked in, I mean, everybody was in their places. It reminded me of like a big football game that people have been looking forward to. This hearing has been anticipated for more than a decade, almost 2 decades. And so when we got about 10 to 15 minutes outside of when the hearing was scheduled to start, it was silence. Of course, everybody was ordered to keep their phones turned off. And the judge or the judge's clerk came out about 10 till and said, "We're about to start. Is everybody ready to go?" And everybody said yes, and really that was it. There wasn't a lot of whispering, wasn't a lot of talking. Everybody was really prepared to get this going and to find out what, in fact, he confessed to. What did he tell the FBI? And there were several, I've read different comments, how can we trust him because he's lied before? Obviously, he lied to the Holloway family attorney, John Q. Kelly, during this whole thing. In fact, John Q. Kelly's the attorney that was mentioned in the indictment. He was the one that was the go-between that he proffered to John Q. Kelly that he could lead them to her remains for this $250,000. And so he's lied before. But they said today that in addition to the polygraph examination that Yaron Vandersloot underwent, they also did some independent confirmation, very extensive investigation based on the words of Prosecutor Lloyd Peoples by the FBI to confirm and corroborate everything, or as much as they could corroborate 18 years later. And they are very confident this is the closest to the truth that the Holloway family will ever receive about what happened to their daughter.
Do you think that there's some sigh of relief that we've come to this point because, we were expecting this to go to trial and it would have been long. So your sense, do you think there's a sigh of relief that this is now?
Well, according to the judge, if she had rejected the guilty plea, rejected the sentencing agreement, that he would not have received 20 years in prison. Like I mentioned a minute ago, the sentencing guideline for this crime under the facts would have been 3 to 4 years in prison. So, and they also wouldn't have gotten the confession. They wouldn't have received the confession to what happened. So the guilty plea probably was the only way to go to get him the sentence he received and the confession that the Holloway family received as well.
And I have to ask you personally, you have been covering this for years, being in this market, 18 years, something that, as you said, have shooken the community, those who live in Mountain Brook, Natalie at the time going on a you know, a high
Yeah.
school trip
Yes.
with her friends and didn't come back. So for you personally, at this point, seeing what went on in the courtroom and seeing Joran van der Sloot face to face, how do you feel at the end of today?
Well, I mean, like I've told a couple of people, I've covered a lot of cases in Jefferson County and Birmingham. Corporate fraud cases, murder cases, corruption cases. As you can see from the media, those are all media members right across the street. I've not seen that many media members here, I think, ever. Maybe the Eric Robert Rudolph guilty plea. Of course, he was the abortion clinic bomber here in Birmingham and also bombed the Olympic Park in Atlanta. But the day that Richard Scrushy was acquitted, that federal trial was in the same building. That's the trial I was covering when we found out about Natalee Holloway's disappearance. The cases don't become more profound than this one, that, like you said, shook the community. It was such a mystery for so many years, so many tips, so many misleading details and stories that people find this and they find that and they send investigators back down. So many stories we've done about, rescue crews, recovery companies that have gone down there to try to find her remains and nothing. And everybody, I believe, began to believe and think that we would never find out what happened to her, that whoever was responsible, now we know based on his confession that it was Joran van der Sloot being responsible, would keep that a secret for the rest of their lives, take that to their grave. And he decided, I guess, to come forward and be contrite as much as he can in the confession. We hope to get more details about that confession. If anything else is released in the court record, we'll obviously obtain those and release those. But I'm trying to see what else I could add. Like you mentioned, one of the quotes that I wrote down that Beth Holloway stated says, "You are a killer, and I want you to remember that every time that cell door closes." Basically, you didn't get your sexual satisfaction from her, so you killed her.
Those are strong words.
That's
John.
what she said.
Strong words from a mother who has,